There are some people who have strong meditation practices, or who have a daily yoga practice that's really grounding for them. Other people swear by journaling every morning, or reading poetry, or watching the sunrise as a way of centering themselves and getting quiet. And then, of course, there are lots of people who pray, who are religious, who regularly engage in forms of collective worship. But for me, the cornerstone of my contemplative life for the last 8 years has been the walk. That's a capital T and a capital W, by the way. I was pleased recently when I came across an essay by Thoreau about walking, in which he also uses a capital W. In the essay, he writes that he'd only met maybe 1 or 2 people in his life who really understood the art of walking, who had a genius, so to speak, for sauntering. Thoreau himself spent at least 4 hours a day ambling through the woods, over hills and fields, absolutely free of all worldly engagements, which apparently already felt stifling in the 1850s. Thoreau felt that 4 hours was the minimum for preserving his health and spirits. I couldn't agree more, even though my daily walk is significantly shorter than Thoreau's. I don't know where I'd be without the walk. I really don't know what my life would look like at this point. But the walk is so simple, so pleasant, and so easeful that I think many people underestimate just how powerful it can be in a person's life. Just by way of illustration, if you were to ask me, how can I start opening up space in my life for contemplation today, I would probably say, start walking. You don't see a lot of people just walking, at least where I live, unless they have a dog. If they're outside exercising, they're probably running or riding a bike. Something that will get their heart rate up, burn more calories in a shorter period of time. I have a friend who was an avid runner, but during COVID, in addition to running, he started going for walks through his neighborhood, for want of anything better to do, and realized how much he'd been missing when he was running. The slower pace allowed him to really see his surroundings for the first time. He made friends with all the neighborhood cats. He noticed subtle changes in the leaves and flowers. He met people. He continued to run for exercise, but he walked for something else. Anyone who sees walking as merely a less intense form of running might say, what's the point of a slower pace? What's the point of noticing the subtle changes of the seasons, or of stopping to talk to cats, or to look at a bird on a branch? Well, there is no point, and that's the beauty of it. Now, don't misunderstand me, and I must say a word here to all the ultra-high achievers out there, and all of the chronically busy people, speaking as a recovering one myself. You will be surprised to discover that the walk is actually the opposite of a huge waste of time. I started walking in November of 2016. That month, as you may recall, there was some national drama, but there was also some local drama, and I was pretty stressed out about all of it. But even though I knew that walking was a great stress relief for me, I still felt unable to leave my desk. At that time, I was the executive director of a small nonprofit that I had founded a few years before, and I was in over my head. I also had a different full-time job, half of which was done at home, on the honor system, so to speak, and it was the kind of job where the work was never really done because it could always be better, and therefore should always be better. So I was constantly having to not only manage my time really well, but also decide when to stop. How good is good enough? How big of an impact is big enough? Could I do more? Could I do better? Could I be more efficient? There were times, however, when the stress was too great and the day too beautiful, when I felt I had no choice but to close my laptop and head out into the sunshine. I would wander through the neighborhood, turning down this street or that, always wondering how far I should go, how long I could afford to stay out. Ultimately, I would feel my work pulling me back to the house, even though I felt I could keep walking forever. But then one day, while I was walking through a nearby park, I noticed that where I would normally just walk to one end and sheepishly turn around and walk back the other way, I could cross the street and continue in a figure-8 loop all the way around the park. I liked this route so much that I did it again the next day, and then I did it the next day and the next. I started timing myself and noticed that whether I walked briskly or at a more leisurely pace, it always took about 40 minutes. So I decided to try something radical. I started leaving my phone at home. I know. I also didn't wear a watch, but it was okay. I could allow myself to lose track of time because I was safe in the knowledge that when I returned from Narnia and stepped back through the wardrobe, only 40 minutes would have elapsed. Of course, leaving my phone at home had other benefits as well. It was nice to be unreachable, something that's almost unheard of in our modern times. But the biggest relief was that I could no longer stop on the street corner to send off a quick email the moment the thought crossed my mind. It just wasn't an option. And I don't know, maybe this isn't a problem for you, but it was a problem for me. Somewhere along the line, I developed this habit of doing things the moment I thought of them, rather than writing them down on a to-do list, which I viewed as an unnecessary delay. I remember hearing this advice, the advice to bypass the to-do list and just do it, as a teenager. It may have come from the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens, which came out in the 90s. Anyway, it's definitely in that vein. This advice is in line with the Ben Franklin quote, "Don't put off until tomorrow what you can do today." But it's like an acceleration of that idea. Why put off for 10 minutes what you could do right this second? Of course, what you could do right this second looked a little different in the 90s than it does today. This highly effective advice, I would wager, has created a lot of really productive, really efficient, and really burned out people. I think there's at least as much wisdom in Mark Twain's counter to the Ben Franklin quote, "Never put off till tomorrow what may be done day after tomorrow just as well." Anyway, back to the walk. So I started going without a phone. That also meant that I couldn't write things down as I thought of them, or even make voice memos. I just had to let those thoughts go and trust that they would cross my mind again later when I could actually do something about it. This complete removal of the option to keep the wheels turning and the plate spinning at all times opened up the possibility of a near blissful state of mind that many of us only get to experience on days when we forget our phone somewhere or lose it altogether. Not even a vacation can bring this about. I started noticing that when I got home from these phone-free park walks, all my problems were right where I left them, unchanged. But it was like I could see them from a bird's eye view, whereas before the walk, it felt like my problems were burying me alive. Well, that's something, I thought. And I decided to keep doing the walk every day. That's when I started really being able to see my life. When people hear the word leisure, they often associate it with luxury, like they might picture someone lying by the pool, reading a magazine, or playing golf. Or they might envision people who have the luxury of time, who sit around on their porch for hours or go fishing all day. It always seems to be something other people can afford, either because of their wealth or because of their time. In other words, basically everyone could say that they cannot afford leisure. And I think that's a problem. One better way of defining leisure is that it's time that's not being used for something. It's like the floor space in a room that doesn't have furniture on it. It's the empty hook on the coat rack, the coffee table with nothing on it. It's useful precisely because it is not being used. At first, people didn't understand what I was doing on the walk. Was it for exercise? Did I carry weights and try to walk a little bit faster every day? Was it for personal development? Did I listen to podcasts or learn a new language while I walked? No, I told them, I just walk. It's not for anything. I like how Thoreau puts it in his essay, which is called Walking, by the way. He says, "The walking of which I speak has nothing in it akin to taking exercise, as the sick take medicine at stated hours, but is itself the enterprise and adventure of the day." Once again, Thoreau has beaten me to it. I too found that this thing that started out as a mental health break became, quite often, my favorite part of the day. I started getting this feeling while I was on the walk that I had arrived, that as long as I could take a walk like this every day, I didn't really need much else to live and be very happy. After a few weeks of walking, I noticed that I no longer went to bed feeling like I hadn't done anything good that day, a feeling that, strangely, used to increase in intensity the more industrious and productive I'd been. All these years later, I still don't fully understand why this is, but it's still true. Now, when I say that the walk isn't for anything, I don't mean to imply that it doesn't have real benefits. It does. It's great for circulation, digestion, emotional regulation, mental focus, and even, and you may find this hard to believe, muscle toning. It's just that none of these are the purpose of the walk. The purpose of the walk is the space it opens up in your life. The walk is daily built-in pointlessness. The world cannot reach you, and you don't know what time it is. I'm reminded of the story about the two men who were lost at sea for 29 days back in 2021. After their GPS tracker stopped working, they drifted for days in the South Pacific, surviving on oranges they'd packed, coconuts floating in the ocean, and rainwater they collected on a piece of canvas. Upon being rescued, one of them remarked that it had been, quote, a nice break from everything. I think a lot of us can relate to this, as scary as it would be to be lost at sea. It can sometimes feel like there's no escape from the constant barrage of the 24-hour news cycle, global politics, work pressures, social obligations, and other stress factors. And if we tend to distract ourselves from all of this using our personal electronic devices, it can really feel like the only way out is to be lost at sea, phoneless, with no contact with the outside world. Going for a walk every day is like being lost at sea for the better part of an hour each day, but with a considerably higher chance of survival. Walking is also great if you have a mind that is currently too anxious to sit in silence. For some, even walking in silence will be a challenge initially, but it's a great first step to opening up space for contemplation because it feels like you're doing something. At least you're moving. I like to joke that if there were a training program designed for contemplative beginners, it might be called 5K to Couch. It's just easier when you're moving. I know that for many it's daunting to open up space like that, for fear of what thoughts might rush in. But I can't stress enough the difference between sitting in your house with anxious thoughts and walking in a park with anxious thoughts. If you're walking, the thoughts have a way of moving through you. They might rush in, but they keep moving, perhaps eventually trickling out or settling into still water that doesn't feel so threatening. My state of mind often evolves during the course of my walk. I can only remember a couple of times in the last 8 years where I started out angry and ended up angry, but those were extenuating circumstances. Usually what happens is that within minutes, my mind starts to relax. It's like with every step, the dust particles of the trivialities of my life settle, and I can start to make out the shape of what's really important to me. My favorite part of the walk comes about 15 minutes in, when I finally reach the edge of the park, which is situated on a hill overlooking a river, with forested land just beyond the city stretching out as far as the eye can see. It's a wide, panoramic view, and I like to stand on a little half wall to see a tiny bit further. It's like being on top of a mountain, only getting there is a total walk in the park. Depending on the time of day, I can watch the sunset from there. I can see cars crossing distant bridges over the river and trains winding their way through the trees below. I can smell the malted barley from a local brewery, and sometimes coffee roasting. I can watch clouds drifting and hawks hunting. I can make out faraway trees swaying in the wind. Going from staring at a screen to being surrounded by such an expansive natural setting is psychologically transformative every single day, even though I've now seen this view thousands of times. But that's not the only perspective shift I experience. When you walk out in the world, you're reminded that, hey, there are other people out here with lives and problems and concerns and relationships of their own that you know nothing about. It sounds silly to say that out loud, but a lot of us do become so hyper-focused on our work and on our lives that we can actually forget this rather important fact. I'm not even going to suggest that this will or should make you grateful or appreciative for the life you live and the particular problems you have, but it will allow you to see your life and your problems differently. Walking also gives you a different perspective on the world, on human nature. The news is, almost by definition, bad news, and our worldview is highly influenced by what we see in the world of the internet. The comments, the opinions, the arguments, the careful selection of people's lives they choose to show us on social media. Walking, especially in a park, you're likely to see a different side of humanity. People caring for their dogs, caring for their children or elders, even helping strangers. You see people doing nice things for themselves, like reading a book on a bench. You'll likely observe someone patiently listening as their partner vents after a stressful day at work. Again, this sounds almost silly to mention. We all know that these things happen, but I can't tell you how nourishing it is to actually witness it with your own eyes and on a regular basis. When I walk, I don't have a mental program. I don't try to keep my mind clear like a walking meditation. If there's a big problem I'm working through in my life, professional or personal, I might spend the whole walk working through it, or I might be grateful for the break from thinking about it. Often my mind floats gently from what I see, smell, and feel to memories and questions. Sometimes I'll have great ideas on my walks, but usually I don't. The heavens rarely open up, but quite often the fog lifts just enough for me to see what my next step should be. And if that isn't reason enough to start walking, I don't know what is. You might not be able to walk for the better part of an hour every day, I get that. But I hope you can find something that your body and your schedule will allow you to do, even if it's just briefly getting outside after you eat lunch or dinner. And I hope that you're able to do it every day, even in cold and rain. And not because the consistency is some sort of sign of having your act together. It's not about discipline or self-mastery. It's about rhythm and space. It's about giving the deepest part of you something to rely on. If you're like me, you'll want to find a route that you can follow every day because, well, decision fatigue is real, and the last thing you need is to add one more bottomless pit of variables to your day. But maybe you're like Thoreau, in which case you might want to choose a different route every day, following your feet wherever they may take you. For you, it might be a welcome opportunity to direct yourself, to be spontaneous and creative. However you do it, use the walk to drive a wedge into your life. And then don't fill it with anything. Insist on this. Make it enjoyable, luxurious, and decadent, and indulge in it every day. And you may begin to really see your life. There's something you can try, starting now, whether or not you walk, that will help you open up space in your modern, perhaps busy and complicated life. It's a fun thing to try on a walk, but you can really do it anywhere. Let's call it the new 5-second rule, and it goes like this. Anytime you notice something beautiful, something pleasing or arresting to the eye, or to the nose, or to the ear, or even to the mind, stay with that thing for 5 seconds. Let's say you notice a purple flower while you're out on some errand and you think, what a beautiful flower. Well, rather than dismissing that thought and moving on, just continue looking at the flower for 5 more seconds. Forget the word purple and just look at it. Drink it in through your eyes. Notice it. Notice how it makes you feel. And don't worry about naming any of it. You can do this with things that aren't stationary as well. Let's say you happen to see a cyclist being courteous to a pedestrian on the street, and you think, isn't that nice? Even though the moment has passed, hold it in your mind for 5 seconds. Notice the courtesy, the warmth of human feeling, and notice how you feel. Other opportunities to employ the new 5-second rule might be when you hear a wind chime, or maybe you notice that the sun is casting a mesmerizing shadow on your office wall. Or maybe you feel a cool breeze on your cheek, or a soft fabric on your skin. First of all, the fact that you would even notice these things and acknowledge their beauty momentarily is already wonderful. It's pretty major, actually. This rule is just an invitation to hold that thought, that feeling, that image for 5 seconds. I will say that it's difficult to contemplate beauty whilst counting to 5. So After you do this a few times, you'll get the feel for how long 5 seconds is, and you can just estimate after that. As you do this more and more, I think you'll begin to notice that 5 seconds seems awfully short, and you'll have this sense that you could stare at this purple flower or listen to this wind chime for a very long time. Whatever you are looking at or listening to will begin to open itself up to you, and you'll feel this internal shift, like a change in barometric pressure. That, my friend, is your capacity for contemplation beginning to open up. If you make this a habit, then the next time you're confronted with a beautiful spring day, you'll be ready. Thanks for listening to First Creatures. I hope you enjoyed the show today. To learn more and to support the podcast, go to firstcreatures.com. You can also find us on Instagram at First Creatures. I want to say a special thank you to everyone who is already supporting this podcast with a monthly donation. Kevin Hahn, Gabriella Ryan, Len Spitzer, Linda Marks, Jasmine Vasileva, Rebecca Anderson, Josh Hahn, Mark and Ann Maisel, Aicha Carteri, Sarah Wolf, Mark Messing, Carrie Mills, Emily Horde, Bill Richter, Corey Delaney, Gina Biver, Rita Dowling, David Hood, Sarah Wendt, Dave Lucado, Helen McDonald, Sarah Lohman, Leanne Clary, Sarah Bryant, Amy Yarsich, Skylar Slack, Janet Scagnelli, Jocelyn Smith, Peter Gridanis, and Martin Gary. Thank you all so much for your support, and thanks for listening.